Good morning. Again, just dropping the kids off. So, I was just thinking, and I was like, let me hop on here and make this video. Someone in our group has decided to send their child to a residential facility. If you don't know what a residential facility is, it is basically a mental health hospital where a child or adult, because they have adult facilities, actually is there 24/7 in a hospital situation getting care. And so think about those stereotypical movie crazy houses that they have. That's what they are. They've renamed them residential facilities. And at one point I had to send my child there because, again, they were hurting themselves so much that they needed 24 care to prevent them from hurting themselves. So somebody had to watch them all the time, of which I was not able to do because, if you don't know, when someone's self-harming, anything literally can become a weapon. I remember all the knives, all the scissors, all the pills, all the chemicals, and then they took a mirror and broke it and used the glass to cut. And so when someone's determined, they will find a way. So where there's a will, there's a way. And so we eventually had to put them in residential facility. Once we put them in residential facility, it was very little contact because, they're in a hospital and they're getting care and therapy every day, around the clock treatment, reinforcing positive behaviors with different plans. And all facilities aren't the same. And because of my child's propensity, we had to put them in a great one. At least I thought it was great. They didn't stay that long. Where it was beautiful and they could go on field trips and have all this other stuff, and it wasn't constrained, and they could walk around the grounds and just sort of have some peace time. It's very tranquil when you walked around. Unfortunately, my child, although not true, because they have literally never gotten into a fight or hurt anybody, loves to tell people that they want to hurt people. And so when you tell people that, they believe you because you don't want to, again, rightly so, have someone tell you that and then they do it and you didn't listen to them. So I get why they believed them. But if you know this child, he doesn't even like moving, let alone fighting or hurting anybody or doing anything of that matter. So they talk a lot and literally do nothing. So they unfortunately got placed into a facility, and there's different types where it's a more restraint, and so there's a lot of locked doors. They have the capacity to physically restrain you if necessary, and the skill set, because it takes a certain training to be able to do that. And so that's where they were. And like I said, they aren't all the same, so I'm not going to say all of them, but if you're in that level of facility where they are allowed to restrain you and there's lots of locked doors and you can't get out and move around, that means that there are a lot of other people who need that level of restraint. And so when my child went there, there was a lot of violence. There was a lot of kids with very serious issues. And so, yes, my child has a serious issue, cutting, self-harming, needed to be corrected. But there are other issues that are deeper than what he was going through. So, he picked up a lot of bad behaviors. He feels that, he was traumatized by this experience. And it's not the only child who says that they were traumatized by this experience. And again, like I said, all facilities aren't the same, but the ones that are bad are really bad. And the only good thing that came out of my child going to this residential facility was that they never wanted to go back again. So it's like, if you send me back there again, if I cut, well, then I'll stop cutting. And so Pete did stop cutting. Unfortunately, transitioned to scratching, and so now has these deep scratches all over himself. So still self-harming, but not cutting to the point where they would get down to a vein and cause any issues. So we're having this discussion about what does a residential facility mean, all this other stuff. They have to accept you first off, and so there's an intake process to it. P, again, told these people of these good facilities these things, and so they don't have to take you, and so they did not take P. And so we had 2 or 3 facilities that refused to take P, which was why we kept getting knocked down to these poor run facilities. And I was telling them, like, hey, make sure you prep your child before they go to intake. You know, you really have to get them on board so they don't say anything that can get them disqualified from being in a good facility over a poorly run facility. And then, at least my child had to go straight from, because they were in the hospital unit, to the residential facility. So they went from one hospital to basically another one. But unfortunately, the hospital is for emergency situations, so you can't stay there forever. You can stay there maybe a few days, max a week, but at some point you have to go somewhere where you can get care. Most of the time, they kind of stabilize you and then send you home in order to get ongoing therapy and medication at home. That wasn't working for P, so we had to, again, that full-time sort of care. And so we talked about, what does that transition look like for the child? Because if they go home and have this time after being in this emergency situation to be at home, a lot of times kids are like, oh, I'm fine now. Parents believe them, and then they don't send them to a residential facility. Problem persists. You know, you possibly lose your spot because, again, they don't have to accept you, and there's a lot of people that want these spots. And so we were talking about, like, what does that timeline look like? You know, being out of school, not being around friends, that's a whole nother thing to have to deal with. And then once they get there, the amount of visitation and calls. And so you can only call during a very specific window. You can only visit on certain days, during certain times and certain hours. And it's you know, you're disconnected from your child. And that has sort of 2 things. Like, one, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what they are doing with my child. You know, just giving them over to this place, and hopefully they're giving them the care that I can't do for them, because they needed to survive and be successful. And on the other end, you know, people don't talk about it, but like, if you've been the parent of a child with mental health and going to doctor's appointments and running back and forth to the hospital, going to lots of therapy sessions, it's draining and tiring. And so it also is that time for you to refuel and put your own mask on before going out and helping your child do what they need to do to be successful. And then the final aspect of, okay, so they're going through this facility. Hopefully they found the right medication. They've built up some good skills, understand how to sort of navigate their feelings and stop some unproductive habits. This is all the goals that you would hope having 24-hour care in a residential facility would provide for you. Then they come home. And so what happens when they come home is there's a kind of a sweet spot where they are so happy to be home. You know, they're just excited that they have the opportunity to be with you again, and it's not even, they're sweet. They're doing everything they're supposed to. They're following their plan for care and treatment. It's going great. But then, you know, you get comfortable like anything. That's why you call it a honeymoon. Like, it's a time period. After that comfort wears off, some of the realness starts to happen. We see if there was real transformation and real change and lasting that happened during this time period. And so some of those behaviors start to come back again. And this is where, you know, as soon as they come out of the facility, you definitely have to have their care lined up for them. I mean, like going to a therapy appointment the next day they get out, so that you have this sort of consistent amount of care, a plan set up so that there won't be that regression back to some of the bad habits or the things that got them to be in that situation in the first place. So if you're a parent that wants to put your child in a residential facility, I would definitely say there's a lot of things to look into. You know, how serious is it? Is the therapy and the medication really not working, or is it just slow? If it's slow, I would say stay on progress with it, even if it's slow. But if it's not working, then definitely consider a residential facility. Call them, look at the reviews, go visit. Like, don't just send your child to this facility once you get there, make sure you call on a regular basis. Make sure you talk to their therapist. Make sure you talk to administration to know that this child is cared for and looked after, and don't let just anything happen to this particular child. And again, once they, and while they're there, encourage them, tell them that you understand that they're going through things. Tell them that you're proud that they're making the changes and doing the work to be better. Really pour into them, because a lot of times they'll feel like I'm a little bit of a failure because I have to be here. But let them know that this is about their health and them getting better. And then once they get home, make sure you really get them into some good care. It should really be a step down, and so I would say residential to maybe partial hospitalization, maybe intensive outpatient programs, but something that's a little bit more intensive than once a week therapy, because you're going for 24 hours a day for usually months, because again, a lot of them stay there at least 3 months. My insurance wanted him to stay there at least 6 months. I only stayed 5, but it was like, no, we wanted 6, because they wanted to make sure that the changes had helped and occurred, and there was not a relapse requiring a child to go back. And so children do go back to residential facilities. There have been kids who have had to go back 2-3 times. And while kids are there is violence, there are fights, there are things happening, because again, your child isn't the only one there that's dealing with mental health issues. There's other kids there who also have severe issues, and so they are not only having to navigate their own psychological and mental health issues, but they are also having to figure out, how do I deal with other people that are having these issues too. And unfortunately, what happened is that P kind of normalized to people having mental health issues, as opposed to being normalized to people managing their mental health. And so that's another thing when they get home, to sort of get them used to what's normal. Fighting every day isn't normal. People harming themselves in front of you isn't normal. Like what should be, and I won't even say normal, but healthy. So what does healthy look like? And they saw months of unhealthy. Now let's talk about and sort of be around what healthy looks like. So oh wow, didn't mean to talk this long, but I just really wanted to share this about residential facilities, because I wish I had known before I sent my child there, just so I could make some better decisions, and hopefully had put them in a better facility, and kept them in a better facility, and helped them understand why they needed to do and sort of be who they were in the better facility, instead of putting on a facade. So hopefully this helps you all. Let me know. All right, like and subscribe and all that jazz.